us begin. This, as you might recognize, is a piece of the desert. And this piece of the desert is important because there are so many wonderful stories that happen with the people of God in the desert that we just had to have a piece of that desert right here in this sanctuary. And you may know a few things about the desert. One of the things is that there's no food in the desert. There's no plants. And I know somebody in here is going to be like, but Diana, let's just roll with this. There's no water. There's no food. It's a dangerous place to be. And that, even the wind whips around and then moves the sand, and then all of a sudden you don't know where you've been and you don't necessarily know where you're going. People don't usually go out into the desert for fun. They go out into the desert because they have to. It takes a lot of courage to come out into the desert. And the people of God were having a hard time because where they were living, the water had not come. It was a great drought. And because there was no water, their crops were failing. And without the grain, they couldn't make bread and they couldn't eat. And so they were hungry and the babies were crying at night and it was awful. And the parents got together and said, we need to go somewhere else where there is food and where there is water. And that meant they had to go across the desert. And so they did. And this took a while. And they crossed the desert together. And they got to a place called Egypt. And in Egypt, they found food and water and work. But Egypt had a king, and that king is called Pharaoh. And Pharaoh told the people what they should be doing. The Pharaoh told the people what they should be eating. Pharaoh had control over what the people, when they would get up. The Pharaoh told the people when they should go to bed at night. The Pharaoh controlled what kind of work they did and when. And in essence, the Pharaoh controlled everything. And the people were enslaved. And one person named Moses came to the Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." And the Pharaoh said, "No." And Moses came back to the Pharaoh multiple times and said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh always said, "No." And then some really bizarre things started to happen. But still the Pharaoh said, "No." And then some really terrible thing happened, and that is that all of the firstborn sons of the people of Egypt died. But the firstborn sons of the people of God did not. And Moses came to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said, "Yes." And so the people started to pack their belongings and to try to put as much as they could into containers that they could carry. And the women started to make bread, but they didn't have time for the leaven, the yeast, to make beautiful fluffy bread, the kind that we would see in our stores or go to a bakery for. They had unleavened bread, more like a cracker. And we can still get this bread today, and you can taste it, and you can taste the store because it's called matzah. So they took their matzah to sustain them, and they took everything they could, and they were really afraid, and they wanted to get out of there as fast as they can, and so they did. And they started to make the journey back out into the desert. And then they heard a horrible sound, the sound that they were most afraid of, which is they heard this roar, and the ground started to kind of rumble, and they realized that the Pharaoh had changed his mind and had sent the chariots and the army after them. And they went a little faster. And they kept going, and then they ended up getting pinned in by this army against the water. And then they didn't know what to do, but God came so close to Moses that Moses knew what to do. And the water parted in front of them. And the people were able to go across. And I wonder what it would have been like. I wonder if some people were really happy to go across. And I wonder if some people were terrified and had a hard time walking because it was so scary. And I wonder what it might have felt like to be one of these people. One of them fainted, and they had to come back and help him get across. Yeah, they're tight. And then once all the people got across, the water came back. And it prevented the army from getting to them, and the people were safe, and they realized that they were free. And they said, wow, we need to give thanks. And so they circled up, and Miriam led them in dancing. Now I wonder, what is the best part of our story today? I wonder, what is the best part of our story today? The water parting? People trusted it was okay to go across even though some of them were scared. Yeah? Manuel, go ahead. Matzah is still available. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. I'm sorry? The cuisine. Best part of the story. Yeah. God delivered them. Mm-hmm.
I like the part where God comes so close to Moses that he knows what to do. I wish that would happen more in my life.
You like the part where God came to Moses and was like, this is what you do, and you would kind of like that. Okay.
And then the water went on the shoulders.
I like Miriam dancing.
You liked Miriam
Worship response.
dancing in a response of worship at the end of all of this. Yeah. I wonder if there's a part we could take out of our story and still have all the story that we needed.
I often wondered why God chose such an inhospitable place for his people to be in the first place.
I wonder why God chose such an inhospitable place for the people to be in the first place. So does that mean you would have taken out which part?
Well, they had to escape where they were at to get to a better place, but then it wasn't a better place.
Ah,
So they were trapped by being caught between a rock and a hard place.
they were caught between a rock and a hard place. Yes. We could take out all the no by the Pharaoh and just go, yes. All right? Mm-hmm.
The journey over when people are so desperate for food and survival, they'll accept any sort of treatment as long as it means that they can go on living. And to have God step in and say, we need to be free, you are alive.
Yeah. The part where people are so desperate they'll accept anything, right? Even slavery, if it means they get to continue on. But But God said, we're not going to have all of that. That's not okay. Mm-hmm.
I would take out the death of the firstborn children all the way through there. It's another example of the people suffering because of a bad leader.
We would take out the suffering and the killing of the firstborn son because that's an example of the people suffering instead of the Pharaoh and the system. Unjust. I wonder where you are in this story.
I'm the dancer at the end.
You want to be the dancer at the end? Yeah, yeah. You're the one that fainted and couldn't make it across? Yeah, that's real. All right, well, I'm going to put this story away. And as I do, you can keep thinking about these questions.